This video contains absolutely all the information we have so far about Chapter 5. If you want to help the channel grow, I'd really appreciate it if you played this video in the background while doing your things. Feel free to share your theories about Chapter 5 in the comments. And now, let's get started. What actually led to that, and how the prototype is making her question everything she believed in, and everything she tried to make us believe. But first, let's take a quick dive into the history. The main events kicked off in Chapter 3 after our encounter with Poppy, where she revealed the core problem of Playtime Co. during her monologue.
Listen, I'm not your enemy, but I can't just let you leave. What's happening down here is bigger than all of us, and I need you, so we can get revenge on those monsters who've tortured you, who've tortured us. They didn't act alone. They're disciples of the original, the prototype.
So we were totally convinced that the prototype is our enemy number one, while Poppy is 100% our ally. But now, I'm not so sure anymore. Anyway, then Poppy revealed the secret of the Hour of Joy, which was led by the prototype. This event completely shattered her connection with him and split Playtime Co. into two camps, those who sided with the prototype and those desperate to escape. After that, Poppy added,
They killed everyone. The guilty, the innocent, didn't matter. All that death didn't fix anything. And then, once it was all over, they dragged those corpses down below where they'd never be found. And they ate the bodies to stay alive. The prototype has to die for this, for everything.
Then came the attack on Kissy, and it seemed like there were no doubts left. We were doing the right thing. Then we descended into that very prison, and that's where things got really interesting. After meeting Dowie, we found a surviving Kissy and Poppy, and that's when things really started to heat up. If the first part of this video was more of an introduction, now it's time to really pay attention. Together with Poppy, we make our way to Safe Haven, where she talks to us once again. But unlike her previous words, which we'll come back to later, her monologue in Safe Haven is filled with determination and, to some extent, absurdity.
I need to make this right. What I said on the elevator, it's true. The orphans weren't killed during the Hour of Joy. They were taken. They're below, in the labs. The prototype's home. They are alive, but sleeping. They're with him. And he knows we're here. So, if we're going to free them and stop the prototype, we need to plan for both at the same time. The red smoke you redirected from Playcare? It's an accelerant. All it needs is high pressure and a little spark, and it ignites. The plan is this. We'll fill the foundation with smoke and line it with old mining charges. Then once you, me, and Kissy have freed the orphans, our friends here will blow this place sky high. That's our revenge.
And this is where we start noticing that Poppy's way of thinking is way too simplistic. She talks as if the prototype will just let us walk in, take everyone, and then blow up Playtime Co., his own home. This is the moment I started realizing that something was definitely off with Poppy. It's like she's obsessed with something. Poppy doesn't see the risks and has no real understanding of the consequences of her plan. And Dowie notices it too.
The toys out there in Safe Haven, they're my family. I understand what Poppy wants, what she believes is right. Destroy the factory, destroy him. But I ask you to consider, if we throw everything away, everyone, just to kill the prototype, how much do we waste? I know the others might believe it's right, that we should bury everything, but let's just think about it.
And as we later realize, Dowie was right. Poppy's blind faith in her plan didn't just lead to failure, it led to the complete destruction of one of her own allies, the downfall of Safe Haven, and even greater aggression from the prototype toward us, Poppy, Kissy, and pretty much every other ally we had, if we even have any left. All of this became the key turning points that led to her escape. Poppy was absolutely terrified. Her world crumbled in just a matter of minutes, and everything she believed in turned to dust after the craziest conversation in Poppy Playtime history.
Stay where you are.
And listen closely. You're not going to run. You're not going to fight. The charade is over.
Who is this?
An obvious question with an obvious answer.
You have nothing now. No one. And soon, you'll have less than that.
Stop that.
You don't need to pretend anymore.
Poppy. You don't need to play at being stronger than you are.
You can come home.
How much do you know?
Everything.
This isn't right. All those years. Was there ever an Ollie? Yes, there was.
But that was
A very long time ago. Let me tell you what comes next.
I'm going to come up there, and I'm going to find you.
Your collaborators, the few you have left, they will be dealt with.
This entire time, you've lied to me!
Only because you've kept
Missing the
point. Always been about you.
and we'll harm you.
What we are. That's not a truth that can be
Burnt away. No, not when it can mean so much more. It's time to come home.
I can't go back in the case. I can't. I'm sorry.
And this is it, the moment when Poppy completely lost any hope of salvation. The prototype utterly destroyed all her goals, all her friends, everything she had left. At this point, it becomes pretty obvious why Poppy ran away, leaving the player and Kissy alone with the explosives. She was simply terrified. She was lost, completely overwhelmed by fear, desperate to avoid being locked back in that box. It was a mix of emotions: fear, hatred, betrayal, lies. All of it pushed poor Poppy to just abandon us in what seemed like a death trap. But let's be clear, she didn't betray us, and soon you'll see why. She just needed time to process everything, to figure out how to fix the mess we were in. Before we dive into what's going to happen to Poppy in Chapter 5 and prove why she's not a traitor, we need to understand where all this deep hatred toward the prototype actually comes from. After all, the Hour of Joy was meant to free the toys from the cruelty of Playtime Co.'s employees. And to crack this mystery, one VHS tape is going to help us a lot.
I didn't want... This wasn't what I thought we were gonna leave. Leave the factory. Not this. All those people. Prototype says we can't leave. Not now, not ever. I hate him. I hate him, and I hate this place, and I hate that he's... right. He explained everything, and he's right. We can't leave. It's too risky. What they did to us, we can't ever let it happen to us or anyone ever again. Doesn't make me feel better about the bodies, though. What he was saying about them. I know there's not really another option. The toys will starve otherwise. They'll die. But it's still disgusting.
And now we realize that Poppy and the prototype were once friends, but the aftermath of the Hour of Joy affected them in completely different ways. Poppy wanted to escape, but to be fair, the prototype had a solid reason to convince her otherwise. If they left Playtime Co., all those horrors could just repeat themselves at another factory, under another company. Poppy was completely against consuming the dead employees, even though it was the only way to survive. while the prototype had no problem doing whatever it took. And when the employees were gone, Poppy's own allies started disappearing. That was the breaking point, the moment Playtime Co. truly became hell. That's why Poppy will never forgive or side with the prototype, meaning all those theories about her betraying us or teaming up with him for survival are pure nonsense. In Chapter 5, Poppy will most likely be searching for any remaining allies, and honestly, we still don't know who's left in her so-called reserves. I think after her escape, she'll figure out a way to fix everything and go looking for her lost friends. And maybe, just maybe, one of them will play a key role in the final battle against the prototype. There's a theory that Chapter 5 will be the grand finale of Poppy Playtime, so this kind of setup makes total sense. I believe Poppy will come up with a plan to rescue the orphans, destroy Playtime Co., and while we're at it, take down the prototype once and for all, which, let's be real, would be a huge win. Or, the prototype could just kidnap Poppy and throw her right back into that box. But even if that happens, her role will still be absolutely crucial. But for now, these are just theories, because the real truth will only be revealed after the release of Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is shaping up to be the best one yet, and we already got some leaks hinting at new characters and events. Plus, we're going to break down the latest dev updates and finally figure out how many chapters we're actually getting and when Chapter 5 is dropping. Out of all the leaks floating around, one image stands out. At first glance, it looks totally random, but if you stare at it for a sec, you can make out the silhouette of a clown. Before release, everyone thought this leak was tied to those hats we saw leading up to Chapter 4, but after the gameplay trailer dropped, it became clear. Doey's got a hat, but he ain't no clown. So that means we've got at least one confirmed new character for Chapter 5. Someone clown-like. Maybe it's something similar to Lulu the Clown? He's just a fan-made character for now, but I seriously love his whole concept and design. We also got official concept art for Yarnaby, and honestly, there's not much to talk about there. But Doey's concepts? Now those are actually interesting. One concept in particular caught my eye. It features Mommy, Huggy, and Catnap. And since Huggy is officially back, there's a theory that some past characters could return. Now, Mommy Longlegs? Yeah, that's not happening. But Catnap? Considering how he died and the fact that his vital organs weren't even touched, there's a chance he might make a comeback. Personally, I'm not really buying into that theory, but hey, anything's possible. And yeah, Doey having 7 arms looks kinda weird, considering we know he's a fusion of 3 kids, meaning he should have a max of 6 arms. We all knew Nightmare Critters were just filler in Chapter 4, but the news that Pianosaurus wasn't an original character? That one actually bummed me out. At least now it makes sense why he barely got any screen time. Honestly, I think this character could have been developed way better than what we got in the end. But oh well, he was really just there to introduce Doey. Besides that, Isaac answered a bunch of questions, and the one that caught my attention the most was this one. Did you guys always plan to bring Huggy back? Like, I know he's a bit lackluster because of being the first boss and all, but I've seen some people saying it was a desperate attempt to bring back the hype. So, was it always planned? Before getting to Isaac's answer, I want to share my thoughts. People saying that Huggy's return was just a cheap move to bring hype back to the game are talking complete nonsense. Poppy Playtime is still one of the most popular games out there, and the peak player count proves it. I seriously don't get the logic of those who think Poppy is dying, or whatever. Mob Entertainment and Poppy Playtime are doing just fine. And now, here's the actual answer. It was always planned, but I regret not building up to it more. We were afraid of tipping our hand and making it too obvious, since everybody theorized he'd return even with basically no foreshadowing. Maybe it was supposed to be a more epic moment at first, but honestly, it still turned out really cool. Also, that old message from Zach on Discord is now stirring up rumors that Chapter 5 won't be the final one, and that we might get at least 2 more chapters. But to me, that message was just thrown out there without any real meaning. I'm pretty sure Chapter 5 is going to be the grand finale, and I'm going to do my best to prove it to you. But first, let's dive deeper into Chapter 5. Now, if we already know that the main location of this chapter is going to be the labs, and like Poppy told us, the labs are Prototype's main hideout, then the real question is, are they finally going to show him, or are they just going to keep teasing us? I'll say this straight up. I fully believe Chapter 5 is where they finally reveal him completely, and there are so many clues that point right at it. We've been getting hints about him since the earlier chapters, and his so-called first appearance in Chapter 4 gave us a solid look at his silhouette. But the biggest red flag? That one convo between Poppy and that damn Ollie? The same guy we all thought was some kind of friendly character back in Chapter 3, but turns out he was actually…
Ollie! Something's gone horribly wrong. The safe haven…
Shelf ventilation block B6. Is this where you are, Poppy?
What?
Stay where you are.
And listen closely. You're not going to run. You're not going to fight. The charade is over.
Who is this?
An obvious question with an obvious answer.
You. What did you do with Ollie?
I'm right here, Poppy.
For you,
I'll always be
here. I admit, though, I'm disappointed.
After all that time in your case, I'd hoped you'd see things
Differently, don't you understand?
It's always been about you.
And we'll hobby what we are. That's not a truth that can be burnt away. No, not when it can mean so much more.
Prototype. Please.
It's time to come home.
Poppy.
It's time to come home.
And just like that, we're smoothly moving into the next part of this video. Poppy ran off and left us alone with Kissy, and I'm gonna be real with you, I have no clue where she went. Playtime Co. is massive, but one thing's for sure, she didn't run to the prototype. Her reasons for taking off actually make total sense. We already know she ran away once before, back when she was needed the most.
Poppy was nice. I can't find Poppy anywhere. I don't know what happened or where she went, but it's scary here without her. Maybe she ran.
But this time, it's way worse. Imagine being in Poppy's shoes. You've spent your entire life trapped in lies and false hope, and in just 1 second, your entire mission, your purpose, became almost impossible. She just freaked out. Honestly, she probably just hid somewhere nearby, and I guarantee she's coming back in Chapter 5. Now, whether she comes back alone or brings some kind of new ally with her, that's still up in the air, but I wouldn't rule it out. The timing and the sheer size of the factory let Poppy dodge the same terrible fate that her friend had to face.
Some friend, huh?
Don't worry, I'll find her.
As for you two, try to land on your feet.
I've noticed a lot of fans are starting to worry about Kissy, but let's break this down and really figure out if our favorite Kissy Missy is going to make a comeback in Chapter 5. First off, Kissy literally saved our lives. If it wasn't for her, we'd be scattered across the floor in tiny pieces. Seconds before the explosion, she managed to save not just herself, because we clearly see that she survived, but she also kept us alive. But come on, this is mob entertainment we're talking about. They weren't going to let her off that easy. So, of course, they had to crank up the drama. This time, she lost the same arm that already got messed up back in Chapter 3.
What's she doing? This is... No! No! We're coming! Just hold on! Come on, go faster! Kissy!
What really caught my attention was that one moment in the convo between Poppy and the prototype.
Let me tell you what comes next.
I'm going to
Come up there.
and I'm going to
Find you.
We can clearly hear some footsteps and see the terrified reaction from Poppy and Kissy. The big question is, who's this mysterious figure? I've got two theories, and neither of them is exactly good news. If it's the prototype, then Well, we might have to say goodbye to Kissy Missy for good. But there's another option, Huggy Wuggy. And now that would be interesting. Even though his return was kinda expected way before the release, seeing him in full scale like this still sent shockwaves through the fandom. Everybody knows that Huggy Wuggy was the main antagonist in Chapter 1, but there's a theory that things might change in Chapter 5. What if those very footsteps we heard actually belong to Huggy? What if, after our fall, Kissy and Huggy crossed paths, and she managed to convince him to join us? Or maybe he got fed up with the prototype himself and decided to help take him down. Or what if Poppy ran into him after she escaped and somehow convinced him? There are so many possibilities, but I'm really curious to hear your theories. Personally, I find the idea of Kissy persuading Huggy to switch sides the most believable. Looks like we've covered all the key details about the new chapter. Quick, but to the point. No filler, just straight up facts. And now, before we wrap things up, let's talk about some of the more technical aspects of Chapter 5. I think making the last days of January the release date for the new chapter of Poppy Playtime would be an awesome idea, and it's totally likely that Mob will do it. Why mess with what's been working so well for the past 2 years, right? As for the playtime, that's a trickier situation. Each new chapter seems to be longer than the last one. If Chapter 4 took about 1.5 to 2 hours to finish, then Chapter 3 is going to take at least 3 hours. And since we figured out that Chapter 5 is going to be the most important one for us, its minimum playtime will probably be 4 to 4.5 hours. Chapter 1 dropped on October 12th, 2021. Chapter 2 followed on May 6, 2022, and then Chapter 3 took a whole year and a half, releasing on January 30th, 2024. So on average, there was about a year and a half between releases, but the real issue came with Chapter 4. It launched exactly 1 year after Chapter 3, which was unexpected for many, and for some, an unpleasant surprise. Before Chapter 4, predicting release dates was pretty easy. Now, it seems unclear, but at the same time, kinda makes sense. I'm almost certain Chapter 5 won't drop before 2026. At first, I thought it could come out in January, but honestly, that's not happening. My best guess? May 2026, and I've got a few solid reasons for that. We'll get into the problems with Chapter 4's rushed release in a bit. But first, let's acknowledge something. A 99% chance that Chapter 5 is the grand finale. The devs are hinting at it in every way possible, like the story's wrapping up, and the final showdown with the prototype is literally right in front of us. Each new chapter is way bigger than the last, and that's all thanks to Poppy Playtime's growing revenue. And yeah, despite all the issues with Chapter 4, it still ended up being the most successful one so far. Since it was much more ambitious, both the playtime and development costs went way up, making each chapter take longer to create. But Mob balanced things out by expanding their team. Now imagine this, Chapter 5 is going to be the biggest one yet. I honestly think the full playthrough could take 5 to 6 hours. And if they try to push it out by January, we'd be looking at a buggy, borderline unplayable mess. But if Mob plays it smart and uses the revenue from Chapter 4 wisely, they can take a solid year and a half to craft a near-perfect game, one we can truly enjoy. 1 year just isn't enough, and Chapter 4 proved that. So yeah, expect Chapter 5 around May 2026 at the earliest. That way, you'll get to experience the finale the way it was meant to be.